Today I want to talk about one of the greatest FNAF theories, if not the greatest, that I've ever witnessed, and that's not me exaggerating. That's how I actually feel about this theory. Just to be clear though, it's not my theory. If I was praising my own theory like this, that would be awfully petty. So, this is not my theory. Let's just get that really clear. What I want to do is I want to talk about this theory, and I want to elaborate on it. The original creator of this theory is Reddit user Henry06. And I'm not kidding when I say that this theory solves so many questions that we've had about the series since the FNAF 2 days. That's a long time ago. We've had some questions for a long time, and it seems that Scott is trying to actually give us some answers to these, because remember what he said about the Fazbear Frights books, which is what this theory is based on. They will solve questions about the lore from the past. They'll give hints about it. So, this theory very much does that. It does exactly what he said these books were going to do. I've been doing this intro long enough already. You know what, let's just talk about it. So, as we know in 1:35 AM, if you haven't read that book, by the way, I did an audio book on it. It's on my channel if you want to check it out. And it revealed some crazy stuff, especially in the final Stitchwraith teaser. For those of you who are uneducated, at the end of each of these Fazbear Frights books, there's a teaser featuring a mysterious character called the Stitchwraith. In the latest one, in 1:35 AM, we meet a new character called Phineas. He's this doctor, mad scientist type of thing, and he's creating, what would you call it? Not a monster, a weird robot creature, out of mysterious objects that he has lying around and that he's picked up from auctions online. Now, the reason Phineas is doing this is because he has a theory. A game theory. No. So, his theory is that objects that are nearby a tragedy can, almost soak in some of the agony near that tragedy, and then they can use it. I guess if they're hooked up to some mechanical parts, they can almost power the mechanical parts. It's not quite explained exactly. You can read it for yourself if you don't trust my explanation. Basically what it is certain objects have emotional properties, and these emotional properties can affect both themselves and things around them. It's very vague. He doesn't know much about it, and I don't know much about it because of that. But the reason that I'm talking about this is because in the end, he creates the Stitchwraith. Spoiler alert. He creates the Stitchwraith out of objects filled with agony of tragedies, and then the Stitchwraith attacks him, and it escapes. Why am I bringing this up? Because it's the basis for this theory, this agony, this energy that these emotions can create, specifically agony. Both Reddit user Henry06 and I believe that this solves so many questions that we've had for so long, and I'm actually so excited to share this with you. The first thing that this explains isn't a particularly exciting one, and it's not exactly one that we thought we didn't understand, but it's important to understand the rest of this theory. So, Remnant. Remnant is a relatively small element in this series. It was introduced in the third book in the series, The Fourth Closet, and it's just not really been mentioned all that much since. It shows up in FNAF AR. I believe it has like a cameo, not a cameo, it has a reference in Pizzeria Simulator, but it just doesn't show up all that much, and we don't really know what it is. The best thing we had to explain it is that it's like souls of the dead, who, I guess, want to avenge their deaths or whatever. But even that was just kind of speculation. We thought it was true because we never had anything that contradicts that, but now I think we have a better idea. So what Henry06 explains is that this remnant might not be souls, it might instead be emotions, specifically agony. The only time we see remnants in this series is in FNAF AR, and you use it, you collect it, to fix up your animatronics. And there's a bunch of it. It's everywhere when you're collecting remnant. There's just no shortage of it, let's say. Now, the first piece of evidence I bring up here is that this remnant, it could not be one remnant is one specific soul. That's a lot of souls, especially to just be in your house. Now, what Henry06 suggests is that it's not souls, it's obviously emotions. There could be a ton of emotions lying around, just in the air for you to collect with your special remnant collecting device or whatever. Now, what further supports this theory is that there's actually two different types of remnant. There's bright remnant, and there's dark remnant. Now, if these were souls, what would these represent? Maybe good souls and bad souls? I could see that being the case, but it makes so much more sense to just say that they're emotions. Good emotions like happiness, and bad emotions like anger and sadness. If this is true, then the dark remnant would be the agony that we hear about in 1:35 a.m. Alright, time for the first big reveal. So, what does this all mean? Well, remember this little guy? Shadow Bonnie. For the longest time, we've had no answer as to what the shadows are, but the remnant thing I think solves our problem. If dark remnant is truly agony, then I believe this is a representation of the sad and angry emotions that surround William's murders. Think about it. What did William Afton use to kill people? His Spring Bonnie suit. What does this bear resemblance to? Well, obviously Bonnie. So, if it's true that dark remnant is general bad emotions, wouldn't it make sense for them to take the persona, or I guess fursona, I'm so sorry, of the killer? Okay, but here's where things get a little more crazy. One thing that's very, very important to say about remnant is that when it's injected, it can only be removed through fire. Flame is the only way to remove remnant from its subject. In other words, unless you have fire, the animatronics that are possessed by remnant, and just anything with remnant inside it, is basically immortal. So imagine this. What if William Afton injected remnant into himself to help him become immortal? It's very clear that in the book series at least, that was his main goal towards the end. To become immortal. After he saw that the animatronics were possessed and alive, he wanted a piece of that for himself, and so he began running experiments on himself. Couldn't he have done this in the games as well? Couldn't he have injected remnant into himself to help him live? That could explain how he survived the Springlock failure. Remember, he dies in that Springlock suit, and no one should be able to survive that amount of pain. Except he does. The only logical explanation of this I can think of is that he probably did inject himself with remnant. It's not that crazy of an idea, but... but wait, there's more. All of this could also explain a ton of Easter eggs that we see in these games. Remember FNAF 1, the crying child posters on the walls? Maybe those posters saw something terrible happen, and were haunted, just like we see in 1:35 a.m., by whatever happened in those halls. Presumably one of William's murders. Also in FNAF 1, the rare screen, where the endoskeleton and the bear masks stare into the camera. They shouldn't be possessed, but we know that William murdered kids basically everywhere he could, outside the restaurant, in the back rooms, just, wherever it was convenient for him. Maybe he did in this room. It would certainly make sense. And we know the crying child was in one of these rooms. Not this one, probably, but one of them. It's entirely possible that some of that agony could have gone into these masks or into the endoskeleton. Now, I know, your mind is sufficiently blown already, but there's even more. I'm sure you've noticed that while I mentioned Shadow Bonnie, I haven't mentioned Shadow Freddy. This isn't because I have no evidence for him. In fact, I have some really good evidence that this theory is based in fact. Remember how I said that I believe Shadow Bonnie is like the embodiment of the agony of William's victims? Because it's shadowy, like dark remnant? And he always shows up when you collect too much dark remnant in FNAF AR? That on its own was pretty good evidence, I thought. But there's even more. I think that Shadow Freddy is the agony of someone else. The crying child. The bite victim. Remember, he was bit in Fredbear. Fredbear is a bear. Duh! So it would make sense for his agony to be represented by a bear. Heck, this theory could even explain the phantoms. They could be agony of the children once again. There is one major problem with this theory, though, and that's the fact that even after William dies in the FNAF 6 fire, as well as literally like everything else, Shadow Bonnie still shows up in FNAF AR, even though the man who killed the kids is dead. But even this can be explained by the fact that Glitch Trap, who is arguably still William Afton, somehow come back in the VR game, is still alive. He's there. He takes over your body. So why shouldn't Shadow Bonnie still be here? If he's not dead, the agony still remains. All in all, this theory is really fun and one of my favorites that I've ever seen, and it might not be true, but I like to think it is. This is now my personal headcanon, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember, go support the original post by Enrio6. He goes into a little bit more detail than I have, and, just generally talk about it. I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Also, I'm planning on doing a video where I talk about your guys' theories very soon. So go on the Discord, there's a channel especially for this, submit your FNAF theories, and I might talk about them in a video soon. Anyway, until then, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new here, which I suspect you are, judging from my analytics, maybe subscribe, maybe you could do that. And drop a like if you enjoyed, because I'm a YouTuber. I have to say these things. It's like in the contract. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.